welcome to Facing Future. Today's guests are Barbara Coulson. She's the director of Fashion, Arts, Media, and Entertainment Law Center, or FAME, and she's also a professor of practice at the Cardozo Law School in New York. Also with us is Hilary Jachmans, the founder of Politically in Fashion, which tracks legislation and regulations that impact the fashion industry and creates community for that industry. According to the UN Climate Program, the fashion industry is the second largest consumer of water and is responsible for more global emissions than all of the international flights and shipping industries combined, some 10% of emissions. Dyeing, tanning, and other processes are highly polluting. Microplastics and polyester are ubiquitous in the oceans. Clothing is mostly made by underpaid women in the third world, employing some 75 million people. Human rights are an issue. The environmental impact of fashion has often slipped under the radar, but it is a critical climate issue. Both Hilary and Barbara are involved in legal aspects of fashion, and please take it away.
Thanks, Dale. I became interested in this topic many years ago when I was in-house counsel at Calvin Klein, and I was focused on anti-counterfeiting. And in the course of dealing with the counterfeiting problem globally, I realized that so much of counterfeiting was, so much of counterfeit product was produced in developing countries by poor women who were underpaid in sweatshops. And it was the first time, particularly since I came from the world of luxury, where many of the products of the companies I worked for, certainly subsequently, were made in Italy and France and countries in the US and countries with unions and countries like ours, which learned from the lessons of the Triangle Shirt Factory fire, which kind of led to the rules and regulations in our manufacturing world. And that, as a result of my anti-counterfeiting work, I really became interested in sustainability and in the kinds of problems, and also realized that the fashion industry as a whole was relatively unregulated or self-regulated in terms of broader issues, which we're talking about today.
So there are some bills now in Congress and in state legislatures that deal with the fashion industry. And I believe, Hilary, you're involved in the effort to create a fashion czar to regulate this industry in the United States.
Yes, there's been a lot of movement in this area in the last 2 years that we have not seen previously. I think historically, the fashion industry, as Barbara said, was either unregulated or self-regulated. And we've really seen a change in that in the last 2 years. And I think a lot of that has been driven by consumer interest. People want to express their views with their wallet and how they spend their money. And they're looking at companies to see what they're doing and how they produce their products, how much they're producing, how are they paying their people. And so we are starting to see more engagement because there's only so much that can be done by self-regulation. There is a role for government here. So yes, the fashion jar was an idea that was created by Elizabeth Segrin in Fast Company magazine. And we worked together with her to develop this into a real legislative proposal. And it is in front of the president now. We have sent it here. It was a call on President Biden to create this post. The idea of a czar has been around for 100 years in US politics. We've had drug czars, we've had auto czars, we've had all sorts of czars. And really it's shorthand for a senior level advisor to the president, somebody who would have the president's ear on these issues. And what's really important, I think, for the fashion place here is to be able to see these issues at the 30,000 foot level, right? Because fashion impacts so many different agencies. It's environmental, which I know is our focus today, but it's also trade and tariffs and labor. And so we need somebody who can see how all these pieces fit together sort of on the chessboard and make comprehensive recommendations on regulation so that we're not viewing it as a siloed, we're taking care of the environmental piece, or we're taking care of the labor piece, or we're taking care of the trade piece. No, they all come together. And so that's what we are asking the president to do.
Okay, so would these regulations impact, since most of the clothing is made in the third world, 90% of the clothing is coming from Vietnam and India and Bangladesh, et cetera, China. Would regulations in the United States be able to impact what people can, what's happening in the third world?
I think there are a variety of options and ways that it could happen. Just having to track your supply chains. I mean, that's an issue that has really come to the forethought of people's minds again in these last 2 years, in part because of the pandemic, right? I think a supply chain we became familiar with when we were wondering why we couldn't get masks, why we couldn't get PPE. But obviously, supply chain impacts everything from food and resources and clothing and baby formula, as we've seen right now as well. So yes, any sort of, we can sort of track the activities overseas, the labor protections. We've seen those with the Bangladesh Accord and different types of programs that are in place there. Now, there's a lot still to be done, but there are ways I think we could be impactful in that space.
And the issue, I mean, the tracking of supply chain has been in the works for a long time. But many companies, when they were getting their feet in manufacturing in other countries, particularly the Chinas of the world, you worked with agents in Hong Kong, for example, and the agent wouldn't necessarily tell you, the company, where the factories were located. And all of that, I think, much of that has certainly been resolved by responsible companies. We want to know where we manufacture. So maybe, Hillary, you want to describe the New York bill and where we are with it at this point?
Sure. Yeah, so this was really our first in the nation bill that was introduced by, like you said, Senator Biaggi. She's a senator in New York, state senator, that would essentially require companies who do over 100 million in revenue worldwide to disclose their environmental and societal due diligence and impacts. There were several rallies in New York in support of this bill. You see a lot about this on social media. So I would expect it to be back again next year.
So how open is the fashion industry to regulating its sustainability issues? In terms of fabrics, in terms of dyeing processes. These are tremendously polluting things, and we don't see it because it's in other countries, but rivers are polluted from tanning, particularly horrible leather. All leather processes require tanning, which is of its nature a very polluting industry. I was involved as an animal rights lobbyist in trying to get rid of the fur trade, which was always a losing battle, the leg hold trap and these other horrible things that happen to animals in order to wear animals on our bodies. It's almost difficult to figure out what is a sustainable fabric, what should we be wearing, how can we, what are the fabrics, fabric of our lives. Even cotton is quite polluting. BT cotton, it loses a lot of pesticide and uses up the land, destroys a lot of soil. There's also the fast fashion industry that, gobbles up polyesters. It's a very hard industry to imagine it transforming into something that's environmentally positive. And I just wonder how open the fashion industry, which you both are very familiar with, would be to regulating itself. And I guess that's why the need for the fashions are.
Well, there are many companies that are very much committed to this. I can tell you, I work with a lot of them. Three quick examples: Patagonia, Stella McCartney, Eileen Fisher. Look, you can, your listeners can look on their websites. They're doing amazing things. Consumers really are interested in this. They're passionate about this. And I can tell you, I teach a course at Cardozo with where our students counsel FIT students, Fashion Institute of Technology students, who are the next generation of designers and manufacturers. And out of in startups, and out of the 7 startups that we dealt with this last semester, I think 5 of them were very much about sustainability and climate change. So people care about this. Customers care about this. I think because of COVID, because of the recession, fast fashion has taken a hit. Forever 21 is now went into bankruptcy, and is the trademark is owned by a holding company. I mean, H&M is of course based in Sweden, and Zara is based in Spain, and those stores are certainly full of people. They're marketing people. All of the marketing people in these companies are interested in getting the message out, and it's got to be, the truth in terms of what specifically what these companies are doing to deal with climate change. So it's I think in a way the fashion business is probably a lot more interested in this than say the coal or the oil industry, interested in this topic. And I think that the fact that such a brave and thorough bill as the one, hopefully, which will be reintroduced in New York, is a testament to.
But we're all quite suspicious of the word sustainability because it's often greenwashing. It very often doesn't really have any teeth or really mean anything, and it's a marketing tool in many cases. I saw that there's something called the Green Guides, which I believe, Hillary, you are advocating for and have worked on, was started in 1992, updated in 2012, and hasn't been touched since. Now, the climate crisis has accelerated tremendously in the last 10 years. We are in a very, very dangerous situation at this point, and we need all the help we can get. What do the Green Guides do in terms of, are they really addressing greenwashing? Are they really working positively? What would the updates be to that, and what is it?
Sure. So the Green Guides are, so building on what Barbara said here, addressing marketing issues, claims that businesses make about their products. And so the Green Guides were first promulgated in 1992 from the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, which is an agency here in Washington, D.C. And it's designed to help businesses make accurate claims about their products and for consumers to be able to understand what these claims are. So it's not saying you have to be environmentally friendly, or you have to be sustainable, or you have to do this or that. It is saying if you're going to say you can recycle something, it has to actually be recyclable, right? It can't be that really the way it's put together, you can't actually recycle it except maybe for one small town, in the Midwest. It's got to be accessible to the majority of people. So when you see something that says recyclable, you think, okay, I can do this in my neighborhood and in my life. Same for one of the other guide points is about free of claims. You can't say something is free of a chemical if it was never going to have it in there. To me, it's like saying, water is gluten-free. Well, of course, there was never going to be gluten in there to begin with. So it's not to have misleading claims. You want it to be something that makes sense to your average consumer when you're going in and shopping. So you're right, they have not been updated since 2012. They were updated a couple of times in between 1992 and 2012. It's certainly time for them to be updated. We are in a very different regulatory and political environment now than we were a few years ago in Washington. And so Politically in Fashion did organize the letter that was signed by over 40 brands and thought leaders asking the FTC to start their review process. And we understand this takes a long time, as any federal agency review process does. But like you said, the time is of the essence here with everything that's happening with climate. We can't afford to wait any longer. So we were very pleased to see that the FTC announced last July their 10-year plan for all the things they were going to update. And at top of the list was the Green Guides for action to begin in 2022. And they have not started yet. But we are hopeful that we've been in conversations with them that they are still planning on beginning this review process. And what we would like to see is really for fashion to engage in this review process. When they were last updated in 2012, there were only 2 comments from the fashion and retail space, 2 out of over 315 unique comments. So we want to see that differently. We know there are a lot of brands who are interested in this. They want to make these Green Guides work. Of the 12 principles that are out there now, I think they should be looked at to see in this new context of technology and consumer interest, do these still make sense? And really, it's the practitioners in this space who can best address that, right? So it's the brands who are doing this, who are manufacturing. It's not for me to say, it's for the folks who are working in this space. And my job is to help connect them with the regulators so they can make their case and have this conversation. And I just want to talk a little bit about sustainability and that word, because that's something that the FTC affirmatively did not touch in their update in 2012. They said in their comments they did not have enough information to talk about sustainability. Well, in 2012, I would argue that a lot of ads did not use the word sustainability or sustainable, right? I mean, I think that's a phenomenon that we've seen explode over the last 10 years. And my concern is that the more you use a word that does not have an universally acceptable definition, the more wiggle room there is there to use the word. And so personally, I would advocate that there should be some guardrails on this term. Maybe not a hard and fast definition, but some guardrails. So if you were going to make a sustainable claim, maybe you have to meet 3 out of 5 factors or something that gives some meaning to the word. Because otherwise, we keep throwing around this term without anything to back it up, it's going to lose all meaning, and that would be a real shame.
Yeah, it has lost meaning in many sectors, and it's just a meaningless word to some people. It needs to really be tightly defined, and it's hard to define in terms of fashion. Is there sustainable fashion? It's, for one thing, the volume of clothing produced is in itself an enormous problem. Way too much clothing is produced. We need to use, for example, land not to grow cotton, but to grow probably food for people. Very shortly, we're going to have very serious food shortages already starting, especially with the war in Ukraine. Grain is going to be in high demand. We need land. And then you have the chemically produced polyesters and nylon and so forth. And these are extremely hard to recycle. And I wonder what you actually mean by recycling of clothing. Does it mean the thrift stores? Does it get packaged up and sent to the third world where it becomes waste? And what is the recycling of clothing?
Well, it's clearly problematic. I think there's much more attention to it. I mean, when I teach fashion law at Cardozo, there's a couple of photos just from this year, one of a beach in Chile, just piled to, with castaway clothes. In the past, in the anti-counterfeiting world, companies would donate their counterfeit garments, which were seized in civil or criminal seizures, would be donated to developing countries, stripped of their logos if possible. And honestly, developing countries don't need or necessarily want these things. I mean, how does it help the African, and that's a very general word, but how does it help the fashion trade in Nigeria or Senegal? If you look at any of those countries and the absolutely gorgeous fabrics that they produce, to be dumping our unwanted stuff on them. So that's that's clearly one problem. On the other hand, there has been a real focus at the very high end on the resale market, rent the runway, and the rental market. I wish this were around when I was working and had to wear. When I was working at places where I had to get dressed every day, there's something called Rent the Runway, where you can rent clothes, and young women pay a monthly sum to rent clothes, which is a brilliant idea.
And individual brands are doing it now too, like
Yes.
UBF and Vince, and I think Theory, they all have their own line-specific rentals as well.
Which is it's a small, but it's a step. Another is the whole resale market. I mean, we've always had resale shops in New York, like Michael's. If you needed to dress up, some kind of a gown to wear to something, you could always go to Michael's on Madison Avenue and purchase a used luxury type item. But there's a huge world out there of resale online. Young people buy young people I know who are very fashion focused. This is how they're shopping now. They're buying used clothing online, so they're not buying stuff that's just being manufactured. They're buying. So that whole resale market. Another is the kind of turning the organizations like Goodwill upscale. I have a very dear friend who's on the board of Goodwill, and he's a fashion lawyer. and I went to their annual benefit recently, and they are curating they get some extraordinary donations. Another nonprofit is Housing Works in New York. I mean, you walk into Housing Works, they take very high end. Housing Works is an AIDS charity. Goodwill, of course, is um, deals with lots and lots of causes, but these are both organizations that take donations of very high end um, um, used clothing and sell them. So that's also part of the resale market. Again, it's a small piece, but it's people, companies are appalled. I mean, Burberry, when that story came out about burning stuff, got very, very bad press from that. So it's important for companies to
We
work.
should explain that the clothing that was not sold, the luxury items, were burned because that retained the exclusivity of the product.
And that was, again, that quickly ceased when it was discovered. And I don't know how, I honestly, Burberry's a great company. I don't know how many years that was going on. I had never heard of that with respect to other companies. Many companies deal with, I mean, one of the most successful companies in the country is TJ Maxx and Marshalls, because they have relationships with brands where brands sell them their last year's styles. And many of us shop at TJ Maxx. Everybody doesn't deal with TJ Maxx, but it's a great way for companies to, to sell off their styles from another year rather than donating them or destroying them or the like. So you're absolutely right, Dale. There is, I mean, it's a fact that way too much product is produced. I think in a way, COVID, the state of the world have caused that to slow down. We have a tremendous problem with distribution now. There's been a real shrinkage. It's getting very, very difficult to even find. I mean, like in any industry, to find employees in retail. There was a huge number of store closures during COVID. You can walk down any block, certainly in New York or London or DC or Paris, and see just many, many, many retail stores that sold clothing closed. Many brands have gone out of business. But I think back to Hillary's point, people, there's some very, very brave, and I think this piece of New York legislation is important, and I think it reflects conversations that have been going on for a very, very long time. Hillary, would you talk about the federal legislation, which I just learned about from you, the proposed federal bill? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, so it's interesting to see action at both the state and the federal level in the first half of 2022 that would impact the fashion industry. New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand introduced a bill called the Fabric Act. And it has a few components. The main one is it's a federal build out of the California SB 62 law, which is a labor bill dealing with minimum wage and doing away with the piece rate payment system for workers in the garment industry, which had been a real source of wage theft for a lot of people, and they seek to outlaw that at the federal level. There are allowances to use piece rate as an incentive program, but not as your base salary. So you would have to have a minimum wage. But another interesting component to this bill is a reshoring program. There is a tax credit for companies that have been producing overseas, which we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, to incentivize them to move back onshore. Like you said, 90% of the clothing these days is made overseas. And that's been not so gradually happening over the last 50 years. But prior to that, a lot of it was made in the United States. And for many reasons, environmental, labor, and just sort of a sense of wanting to have something that's produced locally, a sense of pride in something that's produced in your neighborhood, in your state, there is a desire to reshore when possible. But you can't just flip a switch and suddenly have manufacturing back on shore. We ceded, unfortunately, a lot of the technological and skills that were needed to do clothing manufacturing in the United States. So I'm hoping that this bill will help to move that along and provide opportunities, because I hear from companies all the time that are interested in reshoring or need assistance to stay manufacturing in the United States. And that, I think that's a perfect example for the way the federal government can be involved in this industry and be very helpful. It's not just a push down, regulation, you must do this, you can't do that. It's no, okay, here are some resources here so you can continue to manufacture and employ people in this country.
Do not have enough workers here we've got the infrastructure here. We've got OSHA, we do have regulation that we can, certainly count on in many ways, but we don't have the workers and the trained workers. And I can tell you that is a huge problem, and it's one of the reasons why so much product has continued to be outsourced to China, to Vietnam, et cetera, to Latin America. The other thing is, we're outsourcing to China and Southeast Asia, and we're at the cost of flying product in. How about Mexico? How about Haiti? I mean, I had a student the last couple of years who was from Haiti. There is a talented, hungry group of workers in Haiti, which is so close to here, that we could be working with in the manufacturing sector. But again, this is a process. I mean, I have one of the most telling conversations is with one of my colleagues who runs one of the biggest manufacturing companies based in the US, and he manufactures everything in China. And I asked him at one point, are you ever going to be able to bring manufacturing back to the US? And he looked at me and he said, do you want to pay $200 for that coat or $2,000 for that coat? Well, that's certainly the answer. And yes, we also, on that topic, we certainly have to educate shoppers. I talk to my students about it all the time. Think about the way our parents bought clothes. My father had one trip a year to the tailor to get one suit, one jacket, one shirt, and a tie. My mother bought one outfit a year. I look at younger people, and you're absolutely right, Dale. The amount of product that is purchased and thrown away is shocking. And that generation, I think, is finally waking up and realizing the cost that has, what the costs of that.
Yeah.
It's also a respect issue too, right? I mean, I think if you respect the product, and I think part of the same way I grew up too, it was, you had your back to school shopping and things like that. And there was a special occasion and you made very focused, conscious decisions about what you purchased. It ingrains in you a sense of respect, both for the money that you spend, for the product itself. This was a special thing that you bought. And it extends to the people who made the product as well. But if it's something you can just get all the time and throw away really quickly, you lose respect all throughout that continuum there of the product.
Right. Well, the clothing is our identity, and fashion would have us change our identity frequently in order to sell more product. The whole concept of fashion to me is fairly horrifying. You have some clothes, you wear them, you keep them. You don't have to keep changing your look year by year. The advice to people really is to buy less, to buy from, as you say, resale or thrift shops or wherever you can, and stop supporting an enormous, bulk of product that we cannot afford to keep manufacturing if we're going to have any hope of salvaging our planet and keeping life on this planet going. This is a really important issue, and one that's been largely ignored in the climate community, and one we really, really need to look at. And I really thank you both for your work in attempting to clarify, the sustainability, the greenwashing, the regulations and the human rights issues that are involved in this process. And thank you very much for being in a conversation with Facing Future today.
Thank you for asking us.